Welcome to English in Advance. I'm your host, Jessica. Let's start today with a little thought exercise. Picture this. You're standing in a room full of new faces. Maybe it's a party, or a work event, or even just a busy coffee shop. You want to connect. You want to talk to someone. But a little voice in your head holds you back. What do I say? How do I start? What if they don't understand me? Or worse, what if I run out of things to talk about after the first minute? If you've ever felt that way, know that you are not alone. Having a conversation in a language that isn't your first can feel like a huge challenge. But what if I told you it's a skill? Just like learning to ride a bike or play an instrument. With the right tools and a little practice, you can become a confident, fluent speaker. In today's episode, we are going to dive deep into the world of conversational English. This isn't about memorizing complex grammar rules or long lists of vocabulary. This is about the real, everyday skill of connecting with people. We'll explore how to start a conversation with ease, how to keep it flowing naturally, and how to end it with a positive feeling. We will explore this together, using stories, examples, and plenty of practice, so that the next time you're in that room full of new faces, you'll feel ready, and maybe even excited, to start talking. So grab a cup of tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let's begin our journey to becoming a more confident English speaker. Let's start at the very beginning, the first step, which is often the hardest one. How do you actually begin a conversation? It can feel intimidating, but the secret is to start small and be friendly. Simple greetings are the perfect tool to open the door to a conversation. When you meet someone for the first time, a warm smile and a simple phrase like, "Hi, nice to meet you," or "Hello, I'm Jessica," can work wonders. These phrases are friendly, polite, and they signal that you are open to talking. Imagine you're at a local community event. You see someone standing alone near the snack table. You could walk over, smile, and say, "Hi, how's it going?" This is a very common and casual greeting in the United States. It's a friendly way to say hello. The other person will likely smile back and say, "It's going well, thanks. How about you?" And just like that, a conversation has started. It's that simple. Once you've said hello, the next step is to show interest in the other person. People generally enjoy talking about themselves, so asking simple questions is a great way to keep the conversation moving forward. Think of these as bridge questions. They build a bridge from the initial greeting to a more meaningful conversation. Questions like, "Where are you from?" or "What do you do for work or study?" are excellent starting points. These are safe, common questions that help you get to know someone a little better. Let's picture another scene. You're waiting in line at a coffee shop, and you notice the person in front of you has a book with an interesting cover. You could start by saying, "That looks like an interesting book. What's it about?" This is a fantastic way to start a conversation because it's based on an observation, something you both can see. It feels natural and not forced. The person might reply, "Oh, it's a mystery novel. I can't put it down." From there, you can keep the bridge building. You've started the conversation. But how do you keep it from ending after just one or two sentences? The key is to ask follow-up questions. This is perhaps the most important skill in conversational English. A follow-up question shows that you were listening and that you are genuinely interested in what the other person is saying. It turns a simple exchange into a real dialogue. Let's go back to our coffee shop example. The person says they are reading a mystery novel instead of just saying, "Oh, cool," and turning away. You can ask a follow-up question. You could say, "That's great. Are you a big fan of mystery novels?" Or, "I love a good mystery. Who is the author?" See how that works? You took the information they gave you and you used it to ask another question. This encourages them to share more. Let's try another example. You meet someone new named Chloe at a party, and you ask her, "So what do you do?" Chloe replies, "I'm a graphic designer." Now you have a choice. You can nod and say, "Nice." Or you can ask a follow-up question to keep the conversation alive. A good follow-up question would be, "Oh, that's so interesting. What kind of things do you design?" Or, "How did you get into graphic design?" These questions invite Chloe to tell you more about her life and her passions. It shows you see her as a person, not just as a way to practice your English. Now, it's your turn to practice. Imagine you meet a new person named Ben. You ask him, "Where are you from?" And Ben says, "I'm from a small town in Colorado." What are some follow-up questions you could ask Ben? You could ask, "Oh, Colorado, I've heard it's beautiful. What's your favorite thing about living there?" Or maybe, "A small town? That must be very different from living in a big city. What's it like?" Or even something simple like, "Did you grow up there?" Any of these questions would keep the conversation with Ben moving forward in a friendly and natural way. Once a conversation gets going, it becomes a dance between speaking and listening. One of the best ways to be a great conversationalist is to not only ask questions, but also to share a little about yourself. This makes the conversation feel balanced, like a two-way street. Sharing your own experiences or opinions makes the conversation more personal and helps you build a connection with the other person. Let's go back to our conversation with Chloe, the graphic designer. She tells you about the logos and websites she designs. After listening to her, you could share something about yourself that is related. You might say, "That's really creative. I've always admired people who can do design work. My work is much more technical. I'm an accountant." By sharing this, you are giving Chloe information about yourself, which allows her to ask you a follow-up question in return. She might say, "An accountant. Wow, that's impressive. Do you enjoy working with numbers?" And now the conversation is balanced. She shared, and you shared. Here's another example. Imagine you're talking to Ben from Colorado, and he tells you he loves hiking in the mountains. This is a perfect opportunity to share a related experience. You could say, "I love hiking too. My favorite trip was to a national park last year. The views were breathtaking. Have you ever been to Yellowstone?" By sharing your own story, you are connecting with Ben on a shared interest. You are no longer just asking questions, you are participating in a mutual exchange. This makes the conversation far more engaging and memorable for both of you. It's also important to remember that sharing doesn't mean you have to dominate the conversation. It's about finding small moments to add your own thoughts or stories. For instance, if someone mentions they just watched a new movie you've seen, you could say, "Oh, I saw that too. I thought the ending was really surprising. What did you think?" This simple act of sharing your opinion invites them to share theirs and can lead to a fun discussion. So, let's practice this. Imagine your new friend, Maya, tells you, "I'm learning to play the guitar." How could you respond by sharing something about yourself? You could say, "That's so cool. I've always wanted to learn a musical instrument. I tried learning the piano once, but I wasn't very patient." This response is great because it validates her hobby, shares a little about your own experience, and even shows a little vulnerability by admitting you weren't patient. It makes you seem more human and relatable. Or you could say, "That's wonderful. Music is such a great hobby. My brother plays the guitar, and our family loves to sing along when he plays at gatherings." This connects her hobby to your own life through a family story. Remember, the goal of sharing is to build a connection. It shows the other person that you're not just interviewing them, you're actively participating and investing in the conversation. It's a give and take, a back and forth rhythm that makes conversations enjoyable. Another key part of making conversations feel natural and human is learning how to react to what people say. Your reactions show that you're listening and that you care. They add emotion and empathy to the conversation. In English, we use many small words and phrases to show how we feel about something someone has just told us. Let's think about good news first. Imagine your colleague, Liam, comes to you with a big smile and says, "I just got a promotion. How would you react?" A simple, "Congratulations," is good. But you can make your reaction even better and more enthusiastic. You could say, "Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations." Or, "That's fantastic news. I'm so happy for you." Using words like wow, amazing, or fantastic adds energy and excitement. It shows Liam that you share in his happiness. Your tone of voice is also very important here. You should say these phrases with a bright, happy tone. Now, let's think about the opposite situation. Imagine your friend, Olivia, tells you something sad. For example, "I didn't get the job I interviewed for last week." In this situation, you need to show empathy and support. You could say, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," or "That must be so disappointing." These phrases show that you understand her feelings and you feel for her. You could also add a supportive comment like, "I know you'll find something great soon." This shows that you care and are there for her. Avoid saying things like, "That's okay," or "Don't worry about it," as this can sometimes feel like you are minimizing their feelings. It's better to acknowledge their disappointment first. What about surprising news? Let's say your friend Noah tells you, "I've decided to move to Japan next month." A natural reaction would be to show surprise. You might say, "Really? Wow, that's a big move." Or, "You're kidding. That's incredible. Tell me everything." These reactions open the door for Noah to share more details about his exciting plan. They show that you are engaged and want to hear more of his story. It's also important to use small, encouraging words throughout a conversation to show you are listening. These are sometimes called active listening cues. Phrases like, "I see," "Right," "Uh-huh," or "That makes sense" are very useful. You can use them while the other person is talking to show that you are following along. For example, if a friend is explaining a complex problem at work, you can nod and say, "I see," or "Right," at different points. This encourages them to continue and makes them feel heard, without you having to interrupt their story. Let's practice. I'll give you a statement, and you can think about how you would react. First statement. Your friend says, "My dog won first place in a local dog show." How would you react? You could say, "That's awesome. I didn't even know he was in a show. He must be so proud." Second statement. Your coworker says, "I have to work all weekend to finish this project." How would you react? A good response would be, "Oh no, that sounds tough. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you can get some rest on Monday." By reacting naturally and with empathy, you build stronger connections and make your conversations much more meaningful. It's a simple skill, but it makes a huge difference. Just as important as starting a conversation is knowing how to end one politely. This can sometimes feel awkward, especially in a second language. You don't want to seem rude or abrupt. The good news is there are many simple and polite phrases you can use to bring a conversation to a graceful close. The phrase you choose often depends on the situation and your relationship with the person. Let's say you're talking to a new acquaintance at a party, but you need to leave. You can say something like, "Well, it was great talking to you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the party." This is a warm and friendly way to signal that you are ending the conversation. Adding a smile makes it even more polite. Another common phrase is, "I really enjoyed our chat." This is a lovely way to show you valued the conversation. You could follow it with a reason for leaving. For example, "I really enjoyed our chat, but I should probably get going. I have an early morning tomorrow." Providing a simple reason helps the other person understand why you are leaving and shows it's not because you were bored. If you want to see the person again, ending the conversation is a great time to make a plan. For example, if you've been having a great conversation with a new friend, you could say, "This was so much fun. We should do this again soon." Or even be more specific. "I'd love to continue this conversation. Would you be interested in getting coffee sometime next week?" This leaves the door open for future interaction and shows your genuine interest in building a friendship. In a more professional setting, like at the end of a work meeting or a networking event, your language might be slightly more formal. You could say, "It was a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to connecting again soon." Shaking their hand while saying this is also a common custom in the United States. What about ending a casual chat with a friend or neighbor? It can be much more relaxed. You might say something like, "Anyway, I'll let you go. Talk to you later." Or, "All right, I gotta run. Catch you later." These phrases are very common in informal American English. Let's practice a few scenarios. Scenario 1. You've been chatting with a parent from your child's school for about 10 minutes, but you need to go pick up your child. What could you say? You might say, "It was so nice to finally chat with you. I have to go pick up my son now, but let's talk again soon." Scenario 2. You're on the phone with a friend, and you've been talking for an hour. You need to start making dinner. What could you say? You could say, "I've loved catching up, but I need to start making dinner. Can I call you back tomorrow?" Learning these simple phrases will help you end any conversation smoothly and politely, leaving a positive impression on the person you were speaking with. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference in mastering the art of conversation. So far, we've talked a lot about the words we use, but did you know that a huge part of communication isn't about words at all? It's about our body language and our tone of voice. These nonverbal cues can change the entire meaning of what we say. Understanding and using them effectively is a key step to becoming a fluent and natural-sounding English speaker, especially in the USA, where nonverbal communication is very important. Let's start with tone of voice. Your tone is the emotion or attitude you express through the way you speak. The same sentence can have completely different meanings, depending on your tone. Let's take the simple phrase, "That's nice." If you say it with a warm, enthusiastic voice while smiling, "That's nice." It sounds positive and sincere. You are genuinely happy about something, but if you say the same words in a flat, low tone, without any energy, "That's nice." It can sound sarcastic or like you're not interested at all. The listener will believe your tone, not your words. Let's think about asking a question. If you ask, "Are you okay?" with a concerned and caring tone, it shows empathy. The person will feel that you genuinely care about their well-being. But if you ask the same question with a rushed, impatient tone, it might sound like you are annoyed by them. So, when you're practicing English, it's not enough to just say the words correctly. Try to also practice conveying emotion with your voice. Listen to how native speakers change their pitch and intonation. You can do this by watching American movies or TV shows. Pay attention to how the actors' voices rise and fall when they are excited, sad, or angry. Now, let's talk about body language. In American culture, body language is extremely important for showing you are friendly, confident, and engaged. One of the most important aspects is making eye contact. When you are talking to someone, it's important to look them in the eyes from time to time. This shows that you are paying attention and that you are interested in what they are saying. You don't need to stare at them without blinking. That would be uncomfortable. But making regular, gentle eye contact is a sign of respect and confidence. If you look down at the floor or away from the person the whole time, they might think you are nervous, shy, or even dishonest. Another simple but powerful tool is a smile. A genuine smile makes you seem approachable and friendly. It can instantly put the other person at ease and make the conversation more pleasant. When you greet someone, a smile is essential. It signals a friendly intention before you even say a word. Your posture also says a lot. Standing up straight with your shoulders back can make you appear more confident and open. If you are slouched over or have your arms crossed tightly in front of your chest, it can send a signal that you are closed off or uninterested in the conversation. Try to have an open posture, with your arms relaxed at your sides. Nodding is another important nonverbal cue. When someone is talking, nodding your head slightly shows that you are listening and understanding. It's like saying, "Yes, I'm with you," without interrupting them. It's a small gesture, but it makes the speaker feel heard and encouraged to continue. Let's imagine a scenario. You're at a work meeting. Your boss is explaining a new project. To show you are an active and engaged listener, you would make eye contact with your boss, nod occasionally to show you understand, and maintain an open, attentive posture. This nonverbal communication tells your boss more about your professionalism than your words alone might. So, as you practice your conversational English, remember to also practice your nonverbal skills. You can even practice in front of a mirror. Say a few friendly phrases and watch your facial expressions. Are you smiling? Is your expression open and friendly? It might feel silly at first, but it's a great way to become more aware of the signals you are sending. Combining the right words with a positive tone and open body language is the secret to truly effective communication. As you become more comfortable with the basics of conversation, you'll want to expand your toolkit with more phrases that can make your interactions smoother and more interactive. Learning specific phrases for different situations can boost your confidence and help you handle almost any conversational twist and turn. These phrases show that you are not just a passive listener, but an active participant in the dialogue. One very useful type of phrase is one that shows you are engaged and thinking about what the other person is saying. For example, if someone asks you a question that requires some thought, instead of just being silent, you can say, "That's a good question. Let me think about that for a moment." This shows you value their question and are taking it seriously. It also buys you a little time to form your answer in English, which can be very helpful. Another great phrase is, "I see what you mean." You can use this when someone is explaining their point of view. It shows that you understand their perspective, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. It's a way of validating their feelings and keeping the conversation respectful. For example, if a friend says, "I'm just too busy to go to the gym," you could respond with, "I see what you mean. It can be really hard to find the time. Sometimes you won't understand something, and that is perfectly okay. The important thing is to ask for clarification politely. Don't be afraid to say, 'Could you explain that a bit more?' Or, 'I'm not sure I follow. What do you mean by that?' Native speakers use these phrases all the time. Asking for clarification shows that you are interested enough to want to understand completely. It's much better than just nodding along and pretending you understand. Conversations often move from one topic to another. Being able to transition smoothly is a great skill to have. Instead of abruptly changing the subject, you can use transition phrases. For example, let's say you are talking about work, and you want to switch to talking about weekend plans. You could say, "Speaking of being busy at work, it makes me really look forward to the weekend. Do you have any fun plans?" The phrase, "speaking of," connects the old topic to the new one. Another useful phrase is, "That reminds me of something." For instance, if a friend is talking about a delicious meal they had, you could say, "That reminds me. I saw a new Italian restaurant open downtown. Have you heard anything about it?" These transitions make the conversation feel natural and connected, rather than a series of random topics. Let's practice this. Imagine you are talking with a friend about a new movie you both saw. You want to change the topic to talk about an upcoming holiday. What transition phrase could you use? You could say, "I'm glad we got to see that movie. Speaking of fun things, are you doing anything for the holiday next month?" This is a perfect, smooth transition. By learning and practicing these kinds of phrases, you can navigate conversations more easily. They act like little signposts, guiding the conversation and making your interactions feel more polished and confident. Try to pick one or two new phrases each week and find opportunities to use them in your daily conversations. You'll be surprised at how much smoother your English conversations become. A huge part of having a good conversation is feeling relaxed. When we are nervous, our minds can go blank, and it becomes difficult to find the right words. This is especially true when speaking in a second language. So, one of the most important skills you can develop is the ability to stay calm and focus on clear communication, not perfection. Remember, every conversation is a chance to learn and improve, not a test. One of the best ways to stay relaxed is to focus on listening more than speaking. This might sound counterintuitive, but when you truly listen to the other person, it takes the pressure off of you. You don't have to constantly be thinking, what am I going to say next? Instead, you can focus on understanding their story. This is called active listening. It's not just hearing the words, it's about understanding the meaning and emotion behind them. For example, let's say your friend Michael tells you, "I've been really busy with work lately." An active listener wouldn't just nod. They would hear the tiredness in his voice and respond with empathy. You might say something like, "That sounds tough. How do you manage to find time for yourself?" This shows you are paying attention to his feelings, and it makes Michael feel heard and understood. This deepens the connection and, a bonus for you, it gives him another opportunity to talk, giving you more time to think and relax. Another helpful strategy for staying relaxed is to ask open-ended questions. These are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. They invite the other person to share more information, which keeps the conversation flowing and takes the pressure off you. For example, instead of asking a closed question like, "Do you like sports?" try an open-ended question like, "What kind of sports do you enjoy watching or playing?" The first question could end the conversation with a simple no. The second question invites a much more detailed and interesting answer. Let's look at another example. Instead of asking, "Did you have a good weekend?" which could be answered with yes, you could ask, "What did you get up to this weekend?" This open-ended question encourages the person to tell you a story about their weekend, giving you much more to respond to. Open-ended questions often start with words like what, why, how, or phrases like tell me about. Here's a chance for you to practice. Think about how you could change these closed questions into open-ended ones. First question, is this your first time at this event? How could you make that open-ended? You could ask, what brings you to this event today? Second question, do you like your job? How could you rephrase that? You could ask, what do you enjoy most about your job? Or, tell me about a typical day at your work. Using open-ended questions is like opening a door for the other person to walk through. It makes conversations richer, and for the language learner, much easier to manage. You get to listen more, learn more about the other person, and feel less pressure to always be the one talking. This simple change can make a huge difference in how relaxed and confident you feel in any conversation. As your conversations become more complex, you'll find yourself needing to share your own thoughts and opinions. This is a great way to make conversations more engaging, but it's important to do it in a way that is polite and respectful, especially in American culture where direct confrontation is often avoided in casual chat. Using certain phrases can help you express your views without sounding too strong or aggressive. Let's say you're discussing a movie with a friend, and they say they loved it, but you didn't. Instead of saying, "You're wrong, that movie was terrible," which sounds very confrontational, you could soften your opinion. You might say, "That's interesting. I can see why you liked it. but for me, I felt it was a little slow. Or you could say, in my opinion, the story wasn't very strong, but I agree the actors were great. Phrases like, I think, I feel, or in my opinion, are perfect for sharing your perspective politely. They signal that this is just your view, not a universal fact. Here's another scenario. A group of colleagues are discussing a new work policy. Everyone seems to be in favor of it, but you have some concerns. You can voice your opinion respectfully by saying something like, I understand the benefits you're all mentioning, but from my perspective, I'm a bit concerned about how it will affect our workflow. The phrase, from my perspective, is a great way to introduce a different viewpoint without invalidating what others have said. It's also important to remember that it's okay to disagree. Healthy conversations often involve different opinions. The goal is not to win an argument, but to have a respectful exchange of ideas. You can show respect for the other person's opinion even when you disagree. For example, you could say, that's a valid point, but have you considered? This shows you listened to them and considered their idea before presenting your own. Now, let's practice. Your friend says, I think a vacation at the beach is the most relaxing type of vacation. You prefer the mountains. How can you share your opinion politely? You could say, I can definitely see why the beach is relaxing for so many people. Personally, I find hiking in the quiet of the mountains to be more my style. The word personally is another great tool for expressing a preference without making a judgment on someone else's choice. Remember, sharing your opinions adds depth and personality to your conversations. Don't be afraid to have a different point of view. By using these polite phrases, you can share your thoughts confidently and respectfully, which leads to more interesting and meaningful discussions. Conversations are dynamic. They flow and change direction, and that's what makes them interesting. One moment you might be talking about your favorite food, and the next you might be discussing future travel plans. The ability to move smoothly from one topic to another is a skill that makes you a more adept conversationalist. We touched on this earlier with transition phrases, but let's dive even deeper. These transitions prevent awkward silences and keep the energy of the conversation alive. Imagine the conversation is like a river. You don't want to suddenly build a dam and stop the flow. You want to gently guide it into a new stream. Phrases like, that reminds me, are perfect for this. For example, your friend is talking about their new puppy and how much energy it has. You could say, that reminds me of my little nephew. He's also a bundle of energy. We're actually visiting him and my sister next month. See how that worked? The idea of energy was the bridge that connected the topic of the puppy to the topic of your nephew. Another great transition is the phrase, speaking of which, or speaking of that. Let's say you are discussing a difficult project at work. You could say, it's definitely a challenging project. Speaking of challenges, have you started training for that marathon you mentioned a while ago? This creates a seamless shift from a work topic to a personal one. Sometimes, you might want to introduce a completely new topic. You can do this by saying something like, oh, that reminds me of something else I wanted to ask you about. Or changing the subject for a second, I was wondering. These phrases act as a polite signal that you are about to shift the conversation. It prepares the listener for the change. so it doesn't feel too abrupt. For example, I know we were just talking about gardening, but changing the subject for a second. Did you see the game last night? It's also important to be aware of the flow of the conversation and not to change the topic too quickly, especially if the other person is sharing something important or personal. If a friend is telling you about a serious problem, it would be inappropriate to suddenly say, "Speaking of problems, let me tell you about my car." It's all about being sensitive to the mood and tone of the conversation. Let's practice this skill. You are talking with a colleague about a new software program at work. You want to transition to asking them about their recent vacation. How could you do it smoothly? Honche or tingin. You could wait for a pause in the software discussion and say, "Well, I'm glad we're getting that new software sorted out. It makes me think about needing a break. Speaking of which, how was your vacation to Florida? It looked amazing from the photos you posted." This acknowledges the previous topic before gently guiding the conversation to a new, more social one. Mastering these transitions will make you feel more in control of your conversations and help you keep them engaging and lively. No matter how advanced you become in English, there will be times when you don't understand something. This happens to native speakers too. The most important thing is not to panic or pretend you understand. It's much better to be honest and ask for clarification. People will almost always appreciate your effort to understand correctly, as it shows you are truly engaged in the conversation. There are many polite and simple ways to ask for help. If you didn't hear what someone said, you can say, "Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you say it again?" Or a more casual, "Sorry, what was that?" This is very common and not considered rude at all. If you heard the words but didn't understand the meaning, you can be more specific. You could say, "I'm not familiar with that word. What does it mean?" Or, "I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. Could you explain that in a different way?" Most people will be happy to rephrase their sentence or explain a word for you. It can even become a positive learning moment in the conversation. Let's imagine a scenario. Your American friend says, "After work, I'm totally swamped with errands." You might not know the idiom swamped. Instead of just nodding, you could ask, "Swamped? I haven't heard that before. What does that mean?" Your friend would then explain, "Oh, it just means I'm extremely busy. I have a lot to do, and now you've learned a new and very common English expression. Sometimes the issue might be the speed of the speaker. Some people naturally talk very fast. If you're having trouble keeping up, it is perfectly acceptable to ask them to slow down. You can say this very politely. "Would you mind speaking a little more slowly? English is my second language, and I want to make sure I understand everything." Most people will be very understanding and happy to adjust their speed for you. Your honesty can actually build more rapport. Another great technique is to repeat back what you think you heard. This is called paraphrasing, and it confirms your understanding. For example, someone gives you directions. "Go down this street for 3 blocks and take a right at the big blue building." To make sure you understood, you could say, "Okay, so I go straight for 3 blocks and then turn right when I see the blue building. Is that correct?" This gives the person a chance to confirm or correct you, ensuring there are no misunderstandings. Remember, asking for clarification is a sign of a good communicator. not a weak one. It shows you care about the details and are committed to clear communication. Don't let the fear of admitting you don't know something stop you. Embrace these moments as opportunities to learn and to connect more deeply with the person you're talking to. The more you practice these simple phrases, the more confident you'll feel navigating any part of a conversation, even the confusing bits. One of the most powerful and fundamentally human ways to connect with someone is through storytelling. People are naturally drawn to stories. A good story can make someone laugh, think, or feel an emotion. It turns a simple conversation into a memorable experience. You don't need to be a professional writer to be a good storyteller. In conversation, a story is simply sharing an experience from your own life. It could be something funny that happened to you, a challenge you overcame, or a special memory. Learning to share these small stories can transform your conversational skills. So, what makes a good story in a conversation? It should be relatively short, have a clear point, and be easy to follow. A simple structure to keep in mind is a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning sets the scene. Where were you? What was happening? The middle describes the main action or event. What happened that was interesting or unexpected? The end is the conclusion or the feeling it left you with. What was the result? Let's explore this with an example. Imagine you're talking with a new acquaintance, and the topic of travel comes up. They ask if you've ever had a funny travel experience. This is a perfect invitation to tell a story. Instead of just saying, "Yes, I once got on the wrong train," you can bring the experience to life. You could say, "Oh, definitely. It reminds me of my first solo trip to Germany a few years ago. I was so excited and a little nervous. Trying to be this independent traveler, I needed to get from Berlin to Munich. So I confidently walked into the massive train station, found my platform, and hopped on the train that arrived. That was the beginning. I set the scene. Then, for the middle part, you add the action and the drama. I settled into my seat by the window, feeling very proud of myself for navigating everything so smoothly. The train started moving, and for about an hour I was just enjoying the beautiful countryside. Then, the conductor came around to check tickets. I handed him mine with a smile, and he just looked at it, then looked at me, and started shaking his head and speaking very fast in German. The only word I understood was nein, which means no. My heart just sank. It turned out I was on a high-speed train heading to Hamburg, which is in the complete opposite direction of Munich. Now, for the end, the resolution and the feeling. I was so embarrassed, but the conductor was actually very kind. He helped me figure out where to get off and how to get on the correct train back. I ended up getting to Munich 5 hours later than planned. But I learned a very valuable lesson. Always double-check the destination board on the side of the train. It was stressful at the moment, but now it's one of my favorite stories to tell. It reminds me that even when you make mistakes while traveling, it often leads to an unexpected adventure. Do you see how that story is so much more engaging than a simple yes? It has details. It has emotion, excitement, nervousness, embarrassment, and finally, humor. And it has a clear beginning, middle, and end. It makes you feel more human and relatable. Let's try another type of story, a heartwarming one. Perhaps the conversation is about pets. Someone mentions their dog, and it gives you an opportunity to connect. You could share a story like this. Speaking of pets, that reminds me so much of the cat my family adopted when I was a kid. His name was Leo, and he was a stray who used to hide under our porch. He was so scared of everyone at first. For weeks, my mom would just leave food and water out for him, and she would sit on the steps and talk to him in a soft voice, never trying to get too close. Slowly, day by day. He started to trust her. I'll never forget the first time he finally came up and rubbed against her leg. It was such a small moment, but it felt like a huge victory. He ended up being the most loving and loyal cat we ever had. It really taught me the power of patience and kindness. This story isn't dramatic or action-packed, but it's full of emotion and shares something personal about your values and your past. It creates an instant connection with anyone who has ever loved an animal. Now, let's think about how you can practice this. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You can start by thinking about your own life experiences. Take a moment right now and think of a simple story you could tell. It could be about your first day at a new job, a time you cooked a meal and it went completely wrong, or a favorite memory from your childhood. Try to structure it with a simple beginning, middle, and end. What was the situation? What happened? And what was the result, or how did it make you feel? Practicing telling these stories, even to yourself, will make it feel much more natural when you're in a real conversation. Storytelling is a skill, and like any skill, it gets better and easier the more you do it. Building on our foundation of conversational skills, let's explore how to apply them in different specific social scenarios you might encounter, especially in the United States. Each situation has its own unwritten rules and expectations, and knowing how to navigate them can greatly boost your confidence. Let's start with a very common social event, the dinner party. Imagine you've been invited to a colleague's house for dinner. There will be people there you know, and some you don't. This can be a tricky environment. When you arrive, the first thing to do is greet the host warmly. You can say something like, "Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Your home is beautiful." It's also a common custom to bring a small gift for the host, like a bottle of wine, a dessert, or some flowers. Now, you're in the living room where people are chatting before dinner. This is where your small talk skills come in. You might see a small group of people talking. To join them, you can simply walk up, listen for a moment to understand the topic, and then wait for a small pause. You can then add a comment or ask a question. For example, if they're talking about a recent movie, you could say, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear you're talking about the new Starfall movie. I saw it last week. What did you all think?" Let's create a scene at this dinner party. The host, Sarah, is busy in the kitchen. Two guests, Mia and Leo, are talking. Mia is very outgoing, but Leo is a bit shy. Another guest, you, have just arrived. Mia says, "Leo, Sarah was telling me you just got back from a trip to Arizona. I've always wanted to see the Grand Canyon." Leo, who is quiet, replies, "Yeah, it was nice. It was very big. Here, the conversation might die." But Mia, being a good conversationalist, asks an open-ended follow-up question. "Wow, what was the most surprising thing about seeing it in person?" This is your moment to join. You could step closer with a smile and say, "I hope you don't mind me joining. My name is Jessica. Leo, that sounds incredible. I've only ever seen photos of the Grand Canyon. By introducing yourself and showing interest in Leo's trip, you've smoothly entered the conversation. Now, the three of you can talk about travel. During dinner, the conversation is often group-focused. It's important to make eye contact not just with the person you're speaking to, but with others around the table as well. This makes everyone feel included. Also, remember to compliment the food. Saying something like, "Sarah, this lasagna is absolutely delicious. You have to give me the recipe," is a wonderful way to show appreciation to your host. Try to balance your speaking with listening. If you notice someone isn't talking much, like Leo, you could try to bring them into the conversation. You might say, "Leo, Sarah mentioned you're a talented musician. What instrument do you play?" This act of inclusion is a very advanced and kind conversational skill. Let's switch to a more formal, but still very common scenario, a parent-teacher conference. This is a situation where you need to be clear, polite, and effective in your communication. Your goal is to understand how your child is doing and to build a positive relationship with the teacher. When you meet the teacher, "Miss Evans," start with a polite greeting and a handshake. "Hello, Miss Evans. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm David, Chloe's father." Miss Evans will likely start by giving you a general overview. She might say, "Chloe is a delight to have in class. She's very bright and participates well. It's great to hear positive feedback. But you also want specific information. This is where your open-ended questions are crucial. Instead of just saying, "That's good," you could ask, "That's wonderful to hear. Could you tell me more about what subject she seems most excited about? Are there any areas where you feel she could use a bit more of a challenge or support? How is she doing socially? Does she seem to be making friends easily?" These questions show that you are an engaged parent, and they invite the teacher to give you more detailed, useful information than a simple, "She's doing fine." If you have a concern, it's important to phrase it in a collaborative, non-accusatory way. Instead of saying, "Why is Chloe getting so much homework?" you could say, "I've noticed Chloe has been spending a lot of time on homework lately, and she seems a bit stressed. I was hoping you could tell me more about your expectations for homework in this grade." This approach opens a dialogue rather than starting a confrontation. The goal is to be a team with the teacher. At the end of the meeting, always express thanks. "Thank you so much for your time, Miss Evans. I really appreciate your insights. I look forward to working with you to help Chloe have a great year." Finally, let's consider a very casual American social event, a backyard barbecue or cookout. The atmosphere is relaxed and informal. People will be standing in small groups, moving around, and chatting. The topics of conversation are usually very light: sports, hobbies, recent TV shows, plans for the summer, or just funny stories. Joining a group at a barbecue is very low pressure. You can simply walk up to a circle of people, maybe grab a drink or a chip, and just listen for a moment. When there's a pause, you can introduce yourself. "Hey everyone, I'm Mike. This is a great party." Someone will likely respond, "Hey Mike, I'm Tom. Glad you could make it." From there, you can ask a simple question related to the situation, like, "So, how do you know Sarah, the host?" or make a comment about the food. Whatever is on that grill smells amazing. The key to a barbecue conversation is to keep it light and moving. You might chat with one group for 10 minutes and then politely excuse yourself to get another drink and then join a different group. To leave a group, you can say something simple like, "Well, it was great chatting with you all. I'm going to go grab a burger. Maybe I'll catch you later." By understanding the unique social rules of these different situations, you can feel more prepared and confident to use your English skills in the real world. Even the most skilled communicators sometimes find themselves in tricky conversational situations. Knowing how to handle these moments with grace can make a huge difference in your interactions. Let's talk about some common challenges and strategies to navigate them. One common challenge is needing to interrupt someone. In American culture, interrupting is generally considered rude, but there are times when it's necessary. Perhaps you're in a meeting and time is running out, or someone has said something you must clarify immediately. The key is to do it politely. First, use a polite opening phrase. Start with something like, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but," or "if I could just jump in here for a moment." These phrases signal that you know you are breaking the conversational rule and you are being respectful about it. Second, keep your interruption brief and to the point. State why you need to interrupt. For example, in a work meeting, you might say, "I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mark, but I just want to clarify that the deadline for that project is actually next Friday, not Thursday. I wouldn't want the team to have the wrong information. Here." The reason for interrupting is helpful and important. After you've made your point, you should hand the conversation back to the person you interrupted. You can do this by saying, "Sorry about that. Please, continue what you were saying." This shows respect and allows the conversation to get back on track smoothly. Another tricky situation is when you're talking to someone who completely dominates the conversation. They talk and never ask you any questions. This can be very frustrating. How do you handle this without being rude? One gentle strategy is to listen for a pause, even a very short one, for them to take a breath and jump in. You can validate what they said and then try to pivot the conversation. For example, "That's a really fascinating story about your trip. It actually reminds me of a trip my family took." This way, you are connecting to their topic but steering it in a way that allows you to participate. Another effective technique is to try and involve others in the conversation. This works well in a group setting. If one person, let's call him Tom, is dominating, you can wait for a pause and say, "That's a really interesting perspective, Tom. Maria, you work in a similar field. I'm curious to hear what you think about this." This redirects the spotlight and turns a monologue into a group discussion. It's a very socially aware and inclusive thing to do. But what about one of the biggest fears for many language learners? That moment when your mind goes completely blank and you have nothing to say. The silence feels huge and awkward. What do? First, don't panic. It happens to everyone, even native speakers. The first and easiest trick is to ask a question. If you can't think of anything to say about yourself, get the other person to talk more. You can ask a broad, open-ended question like, "So, what are you most looking forward to in the next few months?" Or, "What's the most interesting thing you've read or watched lately?" These questions can start a whole new line of conversation. A second strategy is to return to a topic from earlier in the conversation. This shows you were listening, and it's an easy way to revive the dialogue. You could say, earlier you mentioned that you grew up in Chicago. I've always wanted to ask, what was that like? Let's imagine a story. A man named Frank is at a party, talking to a woman named Grace. They've talked about their jobs and a recent movie, and then silence. Frank's mind is empty. Instead of panicking, he remembers that Grace mentioned her dog earlier, so he says, I was just thinking about what you said earlier about your dog, Max. What kind of dog is he? I've been thinking about getting a dog myself. Grace's face lights up, and she starts talking passionately about her golden retriever. The awkward silence is broken, and Frank successfully navigated it by simply being a good listener and circling back. Remember, it's not always your responsibility to fill every silence. Sometimes a small pause in conversation is natural, but if it feels uncomfortable, these strategies, asking a broad question or returning to a past topic, are your best friends. They can save you from that dreaded blank mind feeling and keep the conversation moving forward. As we get closer to mastering conversational English, it's important to understand some of the cultural nuances that shape conversations in the United States. Language is more than just words and grammar. It's a reflection of culture. Being aware of these unwritten rules can help you understand the context behind the words and communicate more effectively. One of the first things many people notice about American conversation is the general tone of positivity and enthusiasm. It's very common for Americans to use strong, positive words in everyday chat. You'll hear words like awesome, fantastic, amazing, or incredible to describe things that are just good. For example, if you ask an American colleague how their weekend was, they might reply, "It was awesome." "We just had a barbecue in the backyard." In some cultures, this level of enthusiasm might be reserved for truly exceptional events. But in the U.S., it's a normal part of friendly, positive communication. Don't be afraid to use these enthusiastic words yourself. If a friend shows you a photo of their new puppy, responding with, "Oh, he is so adorable. That's amazing," will be seen as friendly and warm. Another key cultural aspect is the prevalence of small talk with strangers. In many parts of the U.S., it is completely normal and expected to have brief, friendly conversations with people you don't know in service situations. This could be with the cashier at the grocery store, the barista at a coffee shop, or the person sitting next to you on a short bus ride. These conversations are usually very light and follow a simple script. For example, at the grocery store, the cashier might scan your items and say, "How are you doing today?" The expected response isn't a long story about your life. A simple, "I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?" is perfect. They might also comment on the weather. "It's a beautiful day out, isn't it?" Or an item you're buying. "Oh, I love this brand of ice cream." These are simply small attempts to make a routine transaction more human and pleasant. Engaging in this kind of micro-conversation is a great low-pressure way to practice your English every day. Finally, let's talk about the balance between directness and indirectness in American communication. This can be confusing. In business settings, Americans often value being direct and clear. They might say, "I disagree with that approach," or "Let's get straight to the point." However, in social situations or when making requests, Americans often use more indirect or soft language. This is done to be polite and to avoid putting pressure on the other person. For example, if you want to ask your neighbor for a favor, instead of saying, "Can you watch my dog on Saturday?" which is very direct, it would be more common to soften it. You might say, "I was wondering if you might possibly be free on Saturday. I have a small favor to ask." This indirect phrasing gives the other person an easy way to say no without feeling awkward. Similarly, when disagreeing with a friend's opinion, as we've discussed, Americans often soften their language. Instead of, "I don't like that restaurant," they might say, "You know, that place isn't my favorite, but I'm happy to go if you like." Understanding this cultural dance between directness in some contexts and indirectness in others is key. A good rule of thumb is, be clear and direct with information, but be soft and indirect with requests and personal opinions to maintain social harmony. Being aware of these nuances, the enthusiasm, the small talk, and the soft language will not only improve your understanding, but will also help you sound more natural and culturally fluent in your English conversations. As we come to the end of our episode today, let's bring everything together. We've journeyed through the entire life cycle of a conversation, from that first brave hello to the final polite goodbye. We've seen that conversational English is so much more than just grammar and vocabulary. It's an art. It's about connection, empathy, storytelling, and a genuine curiosity about the person in front of you. We started with the simple but powerful tools for beginning a conversation, using friendly greetings and simple questions to build a bridge. We learned the magic of follow-up questions, how they show you're listening and keep the dialogue alive and flowing. We explored the importance of sharing a little about yourself, creating a balanced, two-way exchange that builds rapport. We dove deep into the power of personal stories to create memorable and meaningful connections. We discovered how to react with emotion and empathy, using our words and tone of voice to celebrate good news and offer comfort for bad news. We saw that non-verbal cues, like a smile, eye contact, and open posture, often speak louder than words, especially in American culture. We equipped ourselves with a toolkit of useful phrases for navigating specific social settings, from dinner parties to parent-teacher conferences. We also prepared ourselves for tricky situations, like politely interrupting or handling a conversational lull with grace. Finally, we touched on some of the cultural nuances that will help you sound more natural and fluent. The journey to becoming a confident English speaker is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires patience, practice, and a positive attitude. But the beautiful thing is that you can practice everywhere, every day, every time you order a coffee, chat with a cashier, or talk with a colleague. You are taking another step forward. So, my challenge to you this week is to take one or two ideas from this episode and consciously put them into practice. Maybe you'll focus on telling one small story, or perhaps you'll try to use a softening phrase when making a request. Don't try to do everything at once. Small, consistent steps will lead to big results. Celebrate your small victories, like a 5-minute conversation where you felt relaxed, or a moment when you successfully navigated an awkward silence. Mastering conversational English will open up a whole new world for you. It will allow you to build deeper friendships, succeed in your professional life, and feel more connected to the world around you. You have the ability to become a great conversationalist. Just keep practicing, stay curious, and enjoy the journey of connecting with others. Thank you so much for joining me today on English in Advance. I hope you found this discussion helpful and feel more inspired to go out there and start talking. If you enjoyed this episode and want to continue improving your English with us, please make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications. That way, you won't miss our next episode, where we'll explore another exciting topic to help you on your language journey. Happy learning, and I'll talk to you soon.